scene that we get at the end of seeing Daemon at war with the Stepstones. It's him and Corlys and their respective guys at war with the crab feeder and all of his little guys.
Yeah.
And the problem is, yes, they have Daemon on a dragon, and that can he can do all these kind of bombing runs, blowing up all of the crab feeders. But the problem is they keep running underground.
Yes.
Because this is their home turf.
Yes.
So he's been trying to kill them for
out.
3 years.
Yeah.
He's had this sort of whack-a-mole problem, and we finally see this siege on the Stepstones. And it felt like half an hour. In my head, after we finished the episode, it felt like, okay, so the first half was dealing with the succession problems and all the Targaryens over there. And then the second half of the episode was this whole siege. I was flipping through the episode on my laptop just now. That whole sequence is 13 minutes.
It felt like it felt like 45 minutes.
And it was all character work.
Yeah.
Anytime there was a flash of someone being burnt alive or, disemboweled or whatever, it was a flash. Of those 13 minutes, if you watched it with like a little egg timer, I think most of that would be looking at Matt Smith's face.
Yeah, just his character work. He barely says a single word in this whole episode.
And we're going to talk about that later too. But just to intro that, it's 13 minutes of this whole thing. And I love that there's this threat that all of his men are about to mutiny him. Corlys has to stop his guys from leading a mutiny before Daemon lands on the dragon and joins them. Like, he's in total isolation here. But I wanted to ask you a question about the Stepstones thing while we're there.
Yeah.
Daemon taking this chance, because a guy of Viserys's, footman shows up and hands him a letter saying, we're going to send you reinforcements.
Yes.
And instead of Daemon relaxing because he has help on the way to end this, quandary stalemate he's been in for 3 years, Daemon loses it and beats the guy half to death.
Yeah.
And then kind of goes nuts and finishes off the Stepstones fight and kills the crab feeder.
Yes.
So my question is why? Why does Daemon take this risky invasion, war crime-ridden chance to... is it to avoid Viserys getting the credit? Like, his little brother went rogue, kind of screwed up this conflict, but I came in and cleaned it up.
I think it's less about Viserys getting credit and more about Daemon
not getting credit.
It. Yeah, it's not. He doesn't want it to be about Viserys at all. His whole problem was that Viserys betrayed him by not naming him as heir, by naming his daughter instead. And so he said, you don't trust me, fuck you, I am removing myself from this family. And he left. And he went off to do his own thing and prove himself maybe in his own way. He kind of tried to start his own thing by stealing the egg and marrying the woman, but that didn't work out very well.
The second wife, yeah.
Yeah, and so he's been trying to do his own thing and succeed in his own way, and it hasn't been working. And so Viserys trying to step in with this 3-year conflict to save the day is just the last straw for him. And he says, no, I'm going to solve this myself. It's like that stubborn, he's not a middle child, I presume. I don't think they have a younger sibling, but it feels like a middle child thing.
It's the Versailles thing. It's the competition between brothers.
It's the stubborn, no, I'm going to do this myself. I don't need your help. I don't want your help.
Because I think the first blush reading of the situation is, he wants to get the credit and he doesn't want his brother to get the credit. And we have Viserys in this cross-cut scene saying that Daemon would rather die than ask for help.
Exactly.
Which is why he has to send help and offer it instead of waiting for Daemon to ask, even though we see Viserys earlier in the episode say Daemon's absolutely losing this conflict.
Right, but then even sending the help is just an insult to him.
Right.
And I don't think it's even about wanting credit. I think it's just about wanting to have done it himself. He doesn't want anybody else to help him. Not about people knowing that he was helped, but he himself doesn't want to be helped, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's all about his own ego.
It's a question of motivation. And I tried to game out another possibility. I want to know what you think of this.
Okay.
Maybe Daemon wanted to be in this conflict long enough, to be kind of losing long enough, that Viserys put aside his resentment for Daemon going rogue and undermining him and shit-talking his dead baby on the, all of that. Yeah. He wanted Viserys to put all of that aside to basically end their estrangement and send help. Daemon being in peril and Viserys sending guys to go help him, that is a stirring up of familial love that cuts through all of their recent disagreements. So now Daemon can return victorious, not needing help, but he can also return to a Viserys who is going to be a little warmer to him because he was just worried about him dying, to the point that he kind of broke ranks and sent help.
Yeah.
Like, if Daemon could win this easily, it's not just that his brother sends him a letter and he gets really mad this time, and then he smokes out the crab feeder. If Daemon could win this easily for the past 3 years, then I have to believe he would have.
But the thing is that it wasn't easy. It was a really big risk, took a lot of luck, honestly, and quite a lot for this show, I think. Him not getting hit with, him getting hit with one arrow in a non-fatal place is pretty, like, really?
He got tagged with like 3 arrows.
Okay. I just mean, so, the risk he had to take and I don't think it's not an easy win. Like, he had to really, really put himself, not just like a soldier,
right,
like himself at great risk, and really had to go for it. And I think you only do that when you're desperate. And like this last straw was like the ultimate cause for desperation.
But Daemon is an aspirational boy. We know he wants his claim to the throne to be respected. He wants to be king one day. But who's going to endorse you being king if it took you 3 years to stamp out some whack-a-mole problem in the Stepstones?
Well, he didn't want it to take 3 years. What do you mean?
But if the point is that he got extra desperate in this episode, like, he was there for 3 years. I feel like you'd get desperate after week 2. Because that means you are not a strong force who can just go stamp out a problem. You're entering into this multi-year tit-for-tat little conflict that makes you no more efficient than anyone else in the realm, especially Viserys.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think that's just part of that is a flaw of the structure of this show, is that we're time jumping quite a lot, and you have to show character moments in a way that makes sense with what you've seen on screen, but still convey that a lot has changed in the time that you missed. And it's kind of clunky. I don't know.
Well, I don't even think it's a flaw. I think it's a provocation. Because it's begging these questions.
Yeah, I'm not mad about it. It just makes it's not what we're used to, and it can be difficult.
But the way, the end of the episode where Daemon drags out the crab feeder's torso
so
as
cool.
like a little trophy, that I cannot believe that is just to show his men, look, I did it. That feels like something you bring home.
Well, that feels like, again, it becomes personal for him by that point, because he has not been able to do it for 3 years. His big brother tried to come in and save the day, and he just lost it and didn't have to cut this man in half, but did it because he was so mad.
But it feels like something he brings home and slaps down on the table during a council meeting to show, well, all these guys gave you their like pissy little opinions, and some of them defected and some of them married off their daughters to you and whatever. I went out and got something done.
Well, yeah.
And I'm bringing you back a head on a pike.
Yes, right. I think that makes more sense than he was like trying to get his brother to be nice to him for 3 years.
But I think there could be a strategy in waiting until Viserys bends and sends help. Because that makes Viserys vulnerable.
So it's
on
not
an emotional
about, level. I think I misunderstood your suggestion. It's not that Daemon was like failing on purpose so that Viserys would feel bad and be nice to him. It was more that he wanted Viserys to look weak, and so he like played this long game of. Well,
I think once he realized he couldn't solve this problem in a week and then fly back, I think then he started to get tactical.
He rethought it,
and waiting for Viserys to bend, because I mean, if he exiled Daemon can't walk back in and say, hi, sorry about that. Like, the Kingsguard won't let him back in the city.
He's done, But...
So he has to wait for Viserys to bend. And now he can come back as, like, a conquering hero.
That makes sense. But still, when he's told that Viserys offered to bring aid, that anger is genuine. So, it's not like, yes, this is how I planned it all along. You know?
And you're right. I mean, it's not clear in either direction, but I figure gaming out both ways is going to help us understand the character.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right.
Like... What are we to interpret, to go back to Danica's point, about the crab feeder storyline being wrapped up so quickly? To the point that the guy never spoke a word.
Yeah, it was surprising because we were really not introduced to it until last episode.
And even that was like an homage. It was like a tiny little hint.
It felt like the tiniest provocation that's going to pay off in 2 seasons.
Like the White Walkers.
Exactly.
I mean, we were thinking about them in those terms.
So it didn't feel like something was going to wrap up next episode, and then it did.
But the lesson, I think there are one of 2 options going from here. If we're wrapping this thing up in basically 1 episode of them mattering to the story.
Mm-hmm.
1, it's not really about the crab feeders. This whole interlude has been about Daemon's rebellion.
Yeah.
And I mean, we need to see that. We need to see the thing that activates Daemon, instigates him to fly off into a war that he created, and then do a bunch of war crimes at the end. I mean, that thing of faking surrendering and then betraying them and killing them. I mean, we have the Geneva Convention to prevent things like that. There are rules of engagement.
Right.
I know those things don't exist in Westeros, but it's still a no-no.
Yeah,
there's
you're not
still
supposed
an etiquette.
to. I mean, it's like when it's the Lannisters breaking etiquette or the Starks breaking etiquette. The fucking wedding. I don't know.
Because if you dine with someone and they're in your roof,
yes,
they're supposed to be under your protection.
Yes.
So there are those sort of rules of etiquette. So this is a no-no.
Mm-hmm.
So either we need to see a thing that will drive Daemon to go nuts when we can see the extent of his ambition and evil. Maybe that's the purpose they serve. Or, like you said, this idea of the crab feeders. I mean, we don't even know where they're from or what their whole thing is yet. We haven't met them as much as we've seen them. They're purely spectacle at this point. Maybe we meet them more later. As in, if Daemon does come to power, if we do see him on the throne eventually, we know at least one group in the world has a substantial vendetta against Daemon.
Yeah. Or I'm wondering now if the hurried nature with which we dealt with the crab feeders, those dudes, was meant to be it's a signaling of this show is not about, it's not like Game of Thrones where it's about all that, like we talked about with the intro sequence last week. It's not about the expansive world and all the different factions and peoples and players. This is about one family. It is insular and it is messy and it is isolated. So it's not about the crab feeders and versus the Targaryens versus the realm. Like it's about Daemon and it's about Viserys and it's about Rhaenyra. You know what I mean? Like I think it's kind of like the crab feeders are a big deal and they're a big threat and it's a 3-year conflict, but we don't spend a lot of time on it because that's not the point of the show. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. A last note on the crab feeder thing. I was reminded of something we discussed in the first episode when Daemon sort of half cheated during that tournament.
Yeah.
And we were saying he wasn't going to fully go nuts and just execute that guy and cheat. And, like, instead of aiming at the guy during the tournament, he aimed at the horse. And then he battled the guy. But he didn't execute the guy. He didn't do a war crime in sight of everyone.
Right.
He does a war crime here, but the only people who are seeing it are his men.
Right.
Do you think his men are sufficiently scared of him that they're not going to tell people that he cheated and won on this sort of fake out technicality?
They seem pretty scared of him. I mean, based on his interaction with the messenger who tells him about Viserys sending aid, and the guys tried to stop him, Daemon, and hold him back, but after it happens, they're all like afraid to do or say anything. Like they all seem pretty beat down by Daemon
because this could hurt his reputation.
Yeah,
it could make him look like a sort of an untrustworthy scoundrel instead of, he could totally be the next good king.
But also it seems kind of foolish for Daemon just to think no one's going to say anything about this. Like someone could easily be in a brothel and whisper that rumor to somebody else and then boom, everyone in Westeros knows.
That furthers the point you just made that this whole ecosystem, this whole family is unsustainable.
Yeah.
To the other point about the crab feeder and Daemon being silent. Daemon talks a little bit at the beginning when he's on the dragon and he's saying, like, where are you? Come out, crab feeder. Yep. He says that, but it's in like a monotone sort of taunt. He's not really talking.
No.
He's just kind of,
it's just a tool of warfare.
He's kind of narrating his thoughts while the dragon stomps through this land.
Yeah.
But basically, yes, the crab feeder and Daemon are silent all episode. And they've got these snarling, brooding looks while committing these sort of senseless actions, which exist as provocations for us to parse. We learn a lot about Daemon in this episode, in the same way we learned a lot about him last time, and he was barely in that episode, even though it was named after him.
Yeah.
Like a couple examples of that behavior, which is provocative but unexplained. the stubbornness of being at war for 3 years, inviting death, inviting his own death by running that one-man Normandy beach against the crab feeders, and then entering into single combat with the crab feeder on his home turf. When he spent 3 years not being able to track this guy down, when he runs into that cave after him, that is suicidal. It's crazy that all of this worked.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
all of it could have fallen apart.
Totally. Yeah. And again, I really think that's why this is a like last ditch, like final straw. I have nothing to lose at this point, you know? So I think that's why he took such a big risk.
But those two actions combined with his brutalizing of Viserys's messenger, bringing the happy news of reinforcements. I like that in a show that has to cut things down to the greatest hits of history, the most important and eventful things, and give us enough breadcrumbs so that when those things blow up, it makes sense. I like that the only times the story lingers on anything that wouldn't make a textbook is the ambiguity and horror and drama of Daemon. I feel like he's the most narrative part of this show.
Yeah.
Because most of what we see from Viserys it feels historical.
Yeah.
It feels like landmark moments or observations of a king's reign. But so much of Daemon is him recoiling and plotting and pulling back. And he's the most Game of Thrones part of the show. And I love that as a bridge.
Yeah, me too. What do you think about the fact that we don't see him kill the crab feeder?
It totally complements the fact that we don't see him much at all. Daemon, as much as he becomes the most memorable part of the show,
he's elusive.
As much as I've accidentally chosen him to be on the infographic of all of our episodes, he is such a continued presence and absence in this show that he becomes a specter through the whole series.
Yeah.
The last episode title was The Rogue Prince.
Yeah.
He does kind of hang above everything.
Yeah, he does. Like, even when Rhaenyra and Viserys and Alicent are dealing with all their infighting, there's always the looming threat of Daemon and like the shadow that casts, and the way that just like destroyed the family. Right.
And we know regardless of how this succession battle goes, the monkey wrench of Daemon is going to unseat whoever ends up on the throne after Viserys.
Yeah.